That's right. I have All right.
We're back.
Let's do it.
Let's do this.
What are we doing? Teshuva.
Which means basically what happens when I mess up.
Just in time to be months away from Yom Kippur. A perfect time to discuss this topic.
What happens, Rabbi, when I mess up tremendously? And that means I messed up with my wife, I messed up with my best friend, I messed up with my boss, and also it can mean I messed up with my connection to God.
What
and
about
now,
messed up with yourself? Is there
I messed up with myself.
Against yourself?
Exactly. And Teshuva in Hebrew really means to return. So what am I returning back to? I'm returning back to the source. I'm returning back to my essence. I'm returning back to who I'm meant to be in this world.
Wait, okay. Let's just take one step back. We dived right into it, but I just want to understand. So the idea of returning back means that in life, we are just kind of walking along the path, and then we start to veer off. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is that when we wrong someone in life, it's because we've absent-mindedly veered off the path of
Or it could
goodness?
mean that you didn't absent-mindedly veer off. You could have intentionally made a mistake or veered off.
No one saw that.
No one saw that.
Okay, let's restart. All right. Hey, we're back. Teshuva.
Okay. Which really means
return.
To return.
We're
back to your source, back to your essence, back to who you're meant to be in this world. Because it could really mean that I veered off and I'm not living to my potential. And I might have done something, some kind of action, which is going to hinder my spiritual growth, hinder my connection to the ultimate being in this world.
So how do you catch yourself in that? I know we always talk about awareness here, but in order to return to something, you have to catch that you've left. So I always think about this, there's like this saying, and I'm so guilty of doing this all the time, where you could be hacking away at a forest thinking you're going in the right direction, and you're hacking away really hard, but you might be going in the wrong direction the whole time. So how do you know that you need to return to the source?
That's a great question.
Because I understand the idea of it, but you have to be aware of your source. You have to be aware of your center in order to be able to return to it.
So I think let's then dial this back. And if I were to say to you, Greg,
I love it. We were like off to the races, and someone was like, "Wait, hold on, you're not wearing your shoes." Wait a minute.
Who's Greg Berman?
God, if I know. I've been trying to find Greg Berman.
Who's Rabbi Mordechai Teller? Who is Joe Schmo on the street? And in order to really know to return back to something,
you got to know who that is.
You first got to know who you are. So, step one. This is what I stand for.
So, values.
What are your values?
Values or morals? Are those different?
We'll say, what are your morals and values?
Okay, let's just add them together. We don't want to choose. Okay. Values and morals. Number one.
Values and morals.
So you're saying, and that's just a culmination of your entire life, right? So you think back and you're like, here's all the decisions I've made in life. What were the guiding principles that I chose to make those decisions? So it's like a retrospective look at life. Whenever you're sitting down to do an inventory of Greg's morals, I'm sitting down and going, well, there's one time someone said this, and here's how I reacted. That must be my moral.
What are my morals? What are my values? And I'll couple that together. What are my non-negotiables that I stand for? I
love that term.
That I stand for in life.
I love that term.
And what gets you out of bed in the morning? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
My morals and my non-negotiables.
Your morals, your non-negotiables, and your values will get you out of bed in the morning. So hopefully, a 10-year-old doesn't necessarily know what his morals, values, and non-negotiables are. He or she has parents that is basically feeding this child this is what's right, this is what's wrong.
Well, any social interaction.
Any
right?
social
Their
interaction,
friends,
your friends.
the television.
And television, society, rabbis.
That's why it's so important to make sure that kids, when they're at their most impressionable, when they don't know their source, you want to make sure that the source that they are accumulating at any given time is coming from a good place, right? That they're not watching or reading or exposed to a lot of things that they don't have the intelligence yet to understand is not the path. Because there's tons of media that's created that showcases the wrong path, not as a cautionary tale. But when you're a child, you don't see the nuance of that, right? So you read that and you go, oh, that's why all of those like prank shows are like, don't try this at home, which honestly, for me, was like an invitation. Oh, yeah? Oh, don't try this at home? Please. I'm already halfway into it. I've already set up the trampoline next to my roof, like 100%.
And then you jump off the roof,
hurt yourself,
break your leg, and your mother will say, why did you do that?
I saw it on a YouTube video.
And that was not being connected to your source. That was not being connected to ultimate truth of what would ultimately lead you to your highest potential.
Okay, so morals and values, what gets you up in the morning? What else?
What are you willing to die for?
Interesting.
Which means what are you really willing to live for?
I was just going to say,
therefore, are you living for that? So what are you willing to die for? Know what you're willing to die for, and then ask yourself the question, are you if in fact you're willing to die for that, are you actually living for that? And most people, from my experience, have not asked themselves that question.
What are you willing to die for, Rabbi?
What am I willing to die for?
I'm curious.
I'm willing to die for my family.
I had to imagine that was number
my
one.
family.
Yeah. That's your non-negotiable.
That's my non-negotiable. And even though I'm busy with being a rabbi to the community and doing podcasts and coaching, when push comes to shove, am I willing to die for my family? You better believe it. So then the question should be, then why, if my kid asks me to do something, do I lose my patience? Or do I get angry? Or do I snap at them?
You veered.
I veered off. Because
you're willing to die for them.
If I'm willing to die for them,
why can't
I maintain composure, maintain a sense of dignity, maintain a sense of, oh my gosh, my 10-year-old is asking me a question about life, and they are looking to me for those answers, and I am too busy checking my Instagram.
Look, I mean, I understand the idea that like, you could have that as your value and your guiding light as much as possible. But after the 15th, Dad, look at this. I get it. It's hard sometimes. Life tests you.
And that is the entire test.
Right.
Is that what gets you out of bed in the morning? What are your morals and your values? What are your non-negotiables? What are you willing to die for? Therefore, you ask yourself the question, are you actually living for those things that you're willing to die for? And hopefully you are surrounding yourself in an environment with people who have more experience than you, who have wisdom, who can help guide you on a path towards ultimate truth.
I think that's a really cool concept, this idea that Teshuva, which is this returning to the source, the most important part of returning to the source is discovering your source. And I think we discussed this in episode number 1, which is your source, your morals. What are you willing to die for? What do you wake up in the morning for? Your moralities and your values, they could change at the drop of a hat. My values could change by the end of this episode. And I think it's important to constantly check in with yourself. So let's create a framework for what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. So what does the framework look like for a given person to wake up in the morning and decide, today I want to understand better who I am?
That's That's amazing that somebody is, first of all, asking themselves that question.
You're right. Just having the awareness.
Just
that's
having the
important.
awareness to ask themselves that question, what am I willing to live for? And what did we talk about last episode? This idea of pain. Most people will avoid pain at all costs. So what will end up happening is that from my experience again, have found that people will not wake up in the morning and say, what am I willing to live for? Why is that? Because that requires effort. That requires work. Mm-hmm. That requires time. Time, effort, work equals pain.
Discomfort.
Right. So people would rather get up in the morning.
It's easier to not question it.
And easier not to question, what am I willing to live for? What am I willing to die for? What are my morals? What are my values? What am I willing to stand for?
Right.
And when people don't do that, they're going through life as robots. They're going through life numb. They're going through life comfortable. And then when they're actually tested with that hard potch, as we'd say, where potch is in Yiddish, means like a smack, where quote unquote the proverbial God will...
A potch in the tuchus.
God will wake them up or try to wake them up. And then, sadly, the person will go through an existential crisis.
Well, right.
And then say, oh my gosh, what do I do? Who am I? What is God trying to tell me? God must hate me. God must not love me because he's putting me through this really, really, really hard situation where, in fact, he's actually giving you a blessing which might encourage you at this moment to wake up, to start smelling the roses, to start appreciating life.
Right.
For now, for the first time, you might actually have to ask yourself the question, what are you willing to live for? And are you willing to die for that?
I think a lot of people go through life not asking that question. And here's the biggest problem, I think, is that when you go through life for a long time without asking that question, you start to build a house of cards around decisions that you've made that you didn't really check yourself on, right? And every time you make a decision about what your values are and what your morals are, you're placing a card and then you're placing another card on top of it. And now that's a very precarious sort of foundation that you've created in your life. But at that point, you don't want to lose it because it's a foundation. And I think having some foundation is better than no foundation, right? So then over time, you keep neglecting to ask those questions because you want to keep building up. You don't want to take the time to re-look at your foundation. I've never bought a house. Baruch Hashem, one day.
God willing.
I hope one day. But, that's one of the things. It's like, I've heard enough people who bought houses that are like, we have an inspector coming, because they don't know. They don't know what that foundation is like. And the whole house is built on that.
So you're raising an incredible point, is that sometimes the things in life which are the most meaningful, which could potentially derive the most amount of pleasure, are also the things which could derive the most amount of pain.
Well, they could collapse the whole house of cards.
And the whole house of cards. And it means, am I willing to deal with the responsibility? And really what it comes down to is that many of the problems that I see with the younger generation,
You're not that old.
I'm not that old, but I am in my 40s.
If you say that, next time you got to go, with the younger generation.
Is that a lot of the younger generation is not willing to look at their stuff
and check their foundation
and are willing to take responsibility and say, how did I get to where I got to at this stage in my life?
Look.
And it's just much easier to blame my mother, blame my dad, blame my rabbi, blame society, blame my ex-girlfriend who caused me trauma, and nobody is really willing to say, okay, I made decisions, I made choices that got me down this road. I am now currently in this phase of life, And the people are not willing to say, how did I get here?
Are you familiar with Adlerian psychology?
Absolutely not.
Most people blame their current troubles on past experiences, past trauma. But he says the reason that people do that is because it's more comfortable to accept that, because then you don't have to change. Because if you just blame something on how you were treated before, it gives you an excuse for why you are behaving the way that you're behaving, and you don't have to change your life, essentially, which you can do at any time. Correct. You know, there's this timeless idea of like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you can. You can.
If
that old dog is willing to learn.
Willing to
and
accept,
if there's enough treats involved.
Accept, be incentivized.
Right.
But whatever the motivation is that will enable that old dog to want to wake up, see the light, and then once they've seen the light, change. So actually, I did want to say something.
Yeah.
That according to Judaism, there was a sage. His name was the Rambam.
Oh, yes, I've heard of Rambam. Great name.
The Maimonides.
Great name.
And in his...
Is that his last name? Sorry.
Moshe ben Maimon.
That's his last...
Moshe, the son of Maimon. And don't quote me, but he's known as Maimonides. He's known as Rambam. He's known as Rav Moshe ben Maimon. He talks about that when somebody has erred, or I don't like using this word, has sinned. Basically, what is a sin? It means it's a misfire. In Hebrew, it's called chet, which is a misfire. So the person...
I love that. That's so cool.
It's like, opposed to a sin. Sin makes you feel bad, but a chet is a misfire. So when a person is misfired, how do they do teshuva?
There's so much forgiveness in that term. I love that. That's so much better, because the idea of sin feels like this inexcusable devil act that you've done.
And you're bad.
And it feels like it's like it was intentional in some way.
It's a misfire. It means you missed an opportunity. So how does one return from a missed opportunity? Number one is that you have to acknowledge that you did something that was considered a misfire. Number two, you have to have a sense of remorse. Mm-hmm. The remorse is you feel it on a spiritual level that you did not achieve, perform, show up the way that you could have potentially shown up.
Right. It didn't match your source.
It didn't match your source. Number three is you have to confess. Now, I know confession sounds like you're sitting in a box.
That's more of an acceptance. It's a confession to yourself, right?
No,
or is it bigger than that?
The confession, in this case, confession means I have to make a verbal confession to the person
you've wronged,
that I've wronged, to let them know I, first of all, acknowledged that I did something wrong. I have remorse that I did something wrong, and now I'm coming to you and letting you know that I wronged you and I did something wrong, and I feel tremendously bad about it. It doesn't matter if I'm holding on to the remorse and to the acknowledgement if I don't come to the source that I wronged. So I have to let you know that I did something that I feel really bad about. And step number four is that now I have to come up with a plan on how to change it, to do it differently next time.
And this is all in
This
Rambam's
is written in
teaching?
Rambam's teachings in Mishnah Torah and the laws of doing teshuva, which again means the laws of returning to your source.
And did he get those laws from his interpretation of various passages from the Torah, or is he just a cool guy that we like as a dude who has great ideas?
He was a authoritative.
Definitely authoritative. Authoritarian.
Yes.
Different.
He was an authoritative person who had a lot of wisdom, and he was able to derive that from the oral Torah.
Okay, so it's not necessarily so these laws, or the way that he interprets it, is not necessarily written in the Torah.
It is not written in the Torah, but he has interpreted this, and this is what the oral Torah is meaning from it.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
So does that mean, did he establish the steps of teshuva? in a way?
This is commonly used during the times of, we're in the Jewish
Are
calendar.
there different frameworks?
In the Jewish calendar, the Jews, there's a time of year that we are meant to return to our source. And that is the Jewish New Year,
Rosh Hashanah,
which is Rosh
Yom
Hashanah.
Kippur.
You want to be like the head of a lion, where you start your year off with a bang, kind of like we're going to start this episode off with a bang, that when you start off your year with a bang, we believe that the rest of your year will follow based on how your Rosh Hashanah goes.
And you toot a swirly horn to signal.
Correct.
The start of such a thing.
To awaken your soul to be connected to God.
Right.
And
That's what the shofar stands
That's
for?
what a shofar is. It's meant to heighten and get your soul to awaken and remove all of the things which are holding you back. And then you are then going to shed away all of those barriers, borders, and say, I'm here, God. I know who you are. And then 10 days later, now that I know who you are, God, and we are now close again, because for the last year I might have been
chill.
We might have been chill. I might have been further away. But now that I've
strayed.
Now that I'm coming back, and now that I know you again on Rosh Hashanah, now I have 10 days to now look at my past years of where I misfired, where I misstepped, and then I try my best to acknowledge those things, have remorse for those things, confess to God and say, here's what I've done. I feel bad about it. And now going forward in this new year, I'm going to come up with another proposal plan and how I'm going to be different this year. Now, that is when it comes to man and woman in regards to his or her relationship with God. But it's the same thing. If I have, God forbid, not been in a good relationship with you, Greg, in this past year, from the time period of Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur,
you would call me?
I would call you and say, you know what, Greg, there was an incident that happened on this date, and I feel
specific.
I feel really bad that I didn't contact you immediately after it happened. I feel that it might have had an effect on our relationship, and I care about you tremendously.
I'm going to start keeping a personal ledger of my indiscretions, where I could just maintain like Rabbi, I'm looking through my personal ledger of indiscretions. I've got 4 things in here that I think I've done wrong, and I'd like to talk to you about each one.
And it should be on my dime, my dollar, that I'm also aware of those discretions. And if I'm really being in touch with my morals, my values, how I'd want to show up in this world, what am I willing to live for? Therefore, I'm willing to die for those things. And then if I know myself well enough, I would be like, you know what? I acted like a complete doofus on that date.
Whoa.
To Greg.
That's a very strong word.
And I feel horrible about it, because at the end of the day, that's not how I would want to leave this world. Knowing that I didn't uphold my standards, uphold my values, uphold the way that I would want to live. And again, we learn this at 13 years old. We learn this at 20 years old. We learn this in our 30s. We learn this in our 40s, that it's like every day we're trying to get more and more and more.
What if that person doesn't forgive you? And I understand that, if that person is doing their own self-discovery and their own teshuva and also learning about their source, part of being a good person, in my opinion, this is just my value maybe, but I am a very strong proponent of forgiveness. I don't like to carry negativity with me. There's like one person in my life that I like really don't like still, and it's from an elementary school. It's like the kid in me. I'm sure if I met that guy now, it'd be fine. But like when I think of like, Greg, who do you hate? It's like Chris from 4th grade. He was very mean to me, But that's because at the time, I didn't know my source. I wasn't as forgiving. I just remember feeling very upset about it. But now I really focus my life on forgiveness. I hold no grudges. It's a lot of negativity. But what if the person that you feel like you've wronged doesn't forgive you, and they can't let go of what you've done?
So the Rambam also talks about that one of the mitzvot, now what's a mitzvah in Judaism? A mitzvah is an opportunity to connect to God. It's mistranslated and says it's a commandment. It's a commandment on every Jew to keep 613 mitzvot. But in the more progressive 2025 methodology, we would say it's not commandment, it's an opportunity for a person to connect to his source. So one of the 613 commandments or opportunities that a man, when I say man and woman, can connect to God is that they are not supposed to bear a grudge and they are not supposed to take revenge. Those are two mitzvot that Jews are not meant to bear a grudge and take revenge.
I actually have a thought on revenge that we should get back to, but yes.
So what that means is that why would God not want a person to bear a grudge and take revenge? There is...
Because over time, an accumulation of hatred from a collection of people could become chaotic.
And I have a mitzvah that I'm supposed to love my brother as I love myself.
Right.
And if that's a mitzvah that I'm supposed to love my brother as I love myself, that
but
means...
I can't control the other person. You know, what if I've done something that's
Correct.
so wrong that
Correct.
they just can't forgive me?
Correct.
They're not holding a grudge. They just can't. They can't let it go.
If I'm loving my brother as I love myself, therefore, naturally, I'm going to be living more aligned with my connection to my source, my power, my God. Because I'm living with the intention, the way that God would want me to live in this world. By me connecting to you, I'm being godlike.
Right.
I'm being unconditional. I'm being forgiving. I'm accepting. That's how God wanted the world to be working. However, if I am bearing a grudge, I'm putting a wedge between my connection, between me and you.
Okay.
And therefore, by me putting a wedge between me and you, therefore, I'm inherently not going to have as much of a connection with my source, with my God. And therefore, my day-to-day, if I'm living with this pain, living with this anger, living with this grudge, I'm not going to be operating on full cylinders. I'm not going to be getting the most out of life. Anger and resentment are going to preclude me from getting the most out of what God intended me to have on my day-to-day life. So therefore, if I'm coming to you and asking you, Greg, I'm seeking for your forgiveness, and then you decide not to grant me that, if I come to you 3 times, the Rambam says, and legitimately ask
3 times
for your forgiveness, and by the 3rd time you decide not to grant it to me,
you have to let it go.
Then the thing that I did gets wiped away, and now you get to bear the
Oh, that's diabolical.
you get to bear the hardship.
Yeah.
Because you are not granting me the connection that
that
I'm entitled to have to you.
Oh, entitled? I mean, I understand. I know what you're saying. I gotta lay off the semantics, but
I am.
You're asking for it.
I'm asking for it, and therefore,
But at that point, it's up to you to let go of that conflict. Then, right?
Because you're at this point, you're hindering me now from connecting and to come to closure and to come from ultimate connection, because I'm now bearing this guilt, bearing this weight.
But let me ask you this question.
And now, in a way, if you're punishing me from achieving that which I deserve to have.
But let me ask you this question. What if you really want to forgive and you just can't? You know, like, I understand a situation where someone, someone's done something bad, and you're like, oh man, I understand. Logically, I can see it. I can feel that they're sorry. I want to forgive them, but you just can't. Like the hurt was too much or something like that. I mean, it's too abstract without an example. Let's say a breakup, right? two people, they're in love, they spend some time together, and then something comes.
A divorce happens.
Sure, divorce or any kind of thing where one person decides, this isn't right for me anymore, and the other person doesn't agree. They feel harmed by it, and they part ways, and that person, I'm really sorry that this is how it ended up. I'm just trying to be, I'm trying to live as close as I can to my morals and values, and this is what it's become. And the other person just can't see it that way. They can't forgive them because it just hurt too much. What happens then? The other person they're fair to be hurt, and they're fair to take the time to let those wounds heal. So maybe I'm answering my own question. Maybe it's just a time thing.
It's a time thing.
Hopefully someday they'll forgive you.
And I don't want to be so, as we'd say, another Yiddish word, so chutzpah. Chutzpah means like brazen,
right,
to say this. But there comes a time in life, and we said this earlier in the episode, there comes a time in your life where there should be a sense of acceptance, a sense of taking responsibility, and a sense of looking at the reality and saying, this is what happened. Meaning, I'm sorry that you were broken up with, but that's what happened.
Right.
Stop.
You can't resist what is.
That's what happened. Now stop living in the past. Start taking responsibility, saying that's what happened. Live in the present and say, what am I going to do to grow? What am I going to do to return to my source? Sadly, there are many people who are victims, who are not accepting the reality.
Right.
There comes a point, dudette, that you need to just grow up and accept that this is the reality.
Life's unfair.
Life's unfair. Life is hard. Life has challenges. Life has curveballs that it throws at you. But if you're going to constantly dwell and live in the past and not take responsibility and not acknowledge that this is the reality, then one will be inhibiting themselves from reaching the heights that they're capable of attaining, which is returning to your source of God. And you're going to say, God is unfair that he enabled me to go through this breakup. Really? God is unfair? God maybe put you in that situation, but were you involved in that relationship at all?
Right.
Did you take any part in that relationship? Did you make decisions that might have enabled the other person to treat you that way?
Or to lose that connection.
And I just think that people need to acknowledge that there is a God, and we believe that God doesn't want you to be, God is not unfair. Doesn't want you to be sad. God doesn't do bad things. However, God will put us in situations at times which will hopefully wake us up.
Well, also, I think that this is kind of a product of modern society. Minor inconveniences have started to feel like the end of your life. You want to get pizza, but your favorite pizza place is closed. We're so coddled in the comfort of modern day reality, which is that we're always in a perfect temperature. We're always not too far away from food and regular drinking water. And I'm speaking specifically for modern countries, and because not everywhere is like that. That's a fact. But I think that that's a part of it as well, is that we have all of this privilege around us, and we forget that we're safe. We're very safe all the time. There was a time in our evolutionary cycle where every moment you had to be wary of predators and where you're going to find your next meal and things like that. So we take these minor inconveniences. Oh, someone said something mean to me, and we dwell on them. We spend weeks, months, years dwelling on. That's why I'm so so specific about forgiveness because I know that there are way more important things that I'm very happy about.
Put things into perspective.
Exactly.
What are you willing to live for?
Exactly.
What are you willing to die for?
And what are your morals?
And what are your morals? What are your values? What are your non-negotiables? And then, sadly, we get caught up on, the nail polish doesn't look this way,
right.
or my
I got
car,
a bad haircut,
or I had a bad
something.
haircut,
Oh
and then it destroys our day. And it's like, dude, what?
So let's take the idea of Teshuva and actually think of, and this maybe gets back to what we had talked about earlier of what happens when you wrong yourself. And I think that when you don't forgive, when you hold on to something, that's someone wronging themselves.
Correct.
Right?
Because one is therefore, if they are not willing to move past the hardship, the painful situation, they're willing to dwell in that potential disaster, and they've created suffering out of this thing where it's like,
because they've chose to stay in the pain.
They've chose to stay in the pain, and rather than take the pain and convert it into a growth opportunity, into an opportunity to connect more to your source, they start blaming, and they say, God did this to me, or my ex-girlfriend did this to me, rather than saying, okay, this was an occurrence. This was a time and place in my history that I can actually now pivot and become a more self-evolved, self-aware, self-discovering type of individual. But again, that's too hard. And people would rather not go through the Teshuva process of returning back to the source because that's painful. And I would rather just ignore the pain and stay in my lane and let bygones be bygones, and what's thus is thus, as we'd say.
And I think,
and therefore what happens is that the world has wronged me. The world has wronged me. It's much easier to say that the world wronged me than I have to take responsibility and look at my own actions and say, you know what, I'm going to learn from this past experience, and I'm now going to do something different next time, which will hopefully create more awareness, and I will in turn feel more joy, feel more passion, feel more meaning, because I went through the hard steps, the work to attain meaning.
Every day is another opportunity to move your life forward, whatever that looks like. And the day before only has so much impact on your day today. There's a lot of philosophy that says that the past doesn't exist anymore. It's already gone. It's not real anymore. It's only a memory held by the people who were a part of whatever experience that was. And the future, no matter whether or not you have a meeting on your calendar for a time or any plan that you have, that plan is only tentative. It also does not exist. So the only thing that really exists is right now, which means that anything that happened to you in the past, you choose to carry with you through your memory. It's no longer a real thing. And I understand, again, I always want to make this assertion that when it comes to physical pain or ailments, if you get hurt, that stays with you. But it's how you live with it,
accept it.
That changes your perspective.
It's about surrendering to what that hardship could be and saying, you know what, I'm not going to allow this to be a hardship in my life. I'm going to allow it to be an opportunity for perspective.
It's not going to become a new value for me. It's not going to change
the way I behave. If anything, it's going to help bond our values more, because then we're living with our values. We're living with our values when we can actually go through those tests in life and pass those tests, and then say, you know what? My values are now solidified because I was able to overcome that hardship, that test that God put me through.
I read somewhere that folks who have lost limbs, lost certain ability are actually happier after the accident. There's a study, I'd have to find it, but there's a study that says that folks who have endured something like that and have lost something are actually happier, because on the other end they go, wow, I'm so thankful to still have the rest of what I have, that even though I no longer have, God forbid, my left arm or something, or a finger, or whatever it might be, I'm still so happy for the fact that I'm alive, that I have family, that I have people who support me. And most of those people go on to be very successful because they finally get that clear perspective that even when you think that things aren't perfect, they are. And when everything is perfect,
don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? And that might be the opposite of it.
Parking lot.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Is that don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? But it means that sometimes you have to lose something.
Counting Crows?
It was Joni Mitchell and then Counting Crows, but good.
What a reference.
What a reference.
Deep cut.
That was we're going deep.
Yeah.
But that's the truth, is that once something is gone, then it forces you to say, well, what do I got?
Yeah.
And what is really important to me? A lot. And what I thought was important was, God forbid any of us would know what that would be like to lose a limb. But sometimes people lose the limb and then they say, you know what? It was easier to live a life with the limb, but now I know that there's more to life. And I choosing,
still have meaning.
And I still have meaning, excuse me. And I'm choosing to focus on the real essential things in my life, where before I wasn't doing that because I wasn't faced with a hardship.
And they have come back to the source.
Exactly.
To the center. What a perfect way to wrap up this episode. To return to the source. You're right. Adversity returns you to the source. Every time you face adversity, you're forced to reevaluate who you are, your values, your morals.
Your non-negotiables.
Sorry, that's the same thing. Your non-negotiables.
What are you willing to live for?
What are you willing to die for?
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
This was awesome.
New sign.
Show and teller.
We teased it last time. Oh wait, the camera's still set or shot.
Look there.
There's
Look
somewhere.
There. Show and teller. We got it. Anyway.
Anyway, thank you so much, folks.
Have a good day. Thank you
Stay
so much,
tuned.
guys.